Here he comes, our protagonist. A man forced to live and die again and again, to repent for a sin he doesn't remember committing, an amnesiac cast into a world both surreal and desolate. Every time he dies and reawakens, an archangel hands him a rifle and instructs him to fight his way to the bottom of the nerve tower. In this place, deep below the ground, is where God resides. This divine figure has seemingly gone insane, which is why the world has become corrupted. Not only has reality twisted and deformed, but the planet has also been reduced to dust by a great explosion of heat. You know how the Bible says that God made man in his image? Well, ever since they've gone mad, humanity has similarly been afflicted, and little by little people started becoming both physically and mentally deformed, quite often turning delusional and violent. Those who transform to the point where they fully stop being human are referred to as grotesques. These beings make up the enemies we shall face in our descent through the tower, and only we possess the ability of purifying them. Contrary to what the word might imply, we are not healing or correcting anything. As far as I understand, we are committing simple murder, but purification is the word for the process of extracting a soul's raw data. Because of this, the Archangel is entrusting the protagonist, or rather us as a player, with the mission of killing the creator so that the world can be remade free of deformity. He wants us to get God's data and hand it to him. The guy is very insistent on drilling into us that a sin we supposedly committed is what caused all of this, and that only by allowing him to remake the world, we can atone. And while he sounds hardly trustworthy, it is true that we carry within us a tremendous amount of guilt. So without any apparent choice, we descend the tower in search for answers. If we get to the bottom and kill God, our character chooses to ignore the Archangel and decides to recreate the world just as it was before, believing that it needs another chance and not a new beginning. If we refuse to kill God and approach the entity instead, they take the image of a woman and try to merge with us. In this union, our character gets consumed by God's madness. Crushed by the guilt of his sin, he decides to use God's power to, again, remake the world just as it was. However, our protagonist wishes to have died in the place of his identical twin brother. If we fail to get to the bottom and die, the Archangel transfers our consciousness to a clone of our body and commands us to descend once more. Thus, we live and die, forever stuck in a cycle. It's all quite confusing, so you might be asking yourself, what are we even trying to do? Well, we're trying to beat the game and get the true ending, of course. Baroque is a 1998 roguelike developed for the Sega Saturn and ported to the PlayStation 1. In this game, we explore a procedurally generated dungeon where we fight monsters in a struggle to reach the bottom. Every second that passes, inside or outside the tower, our vitality dwindles, and when it reaches zero, our health starts to drain. Our main method of regaining vitality is by killing, or rather purifying the grotesques and taking their ID as Sephiroth, their souls. While we're pushed to explore and fight to get items and regain our vitality, it is always quite easy to get caught off guard and killed. This is because the game is designed in a way that you never become too strong. Defeating enemies allows you to raise your experience levels, but this only increases your maximum health, making it only marginally useful. The only real method of gaining power is by acquiring better equipment or using consumables that improve your items or raise your stats, and you only find these by delving deeper into the tower and into ever more dangerous territory. But it doesn't stop at that. If you're not careful, your equipment can get degraded, stolen, or turned into random crap, leaving you defenseless until you're able to find a proper replacement. And if we die, or even if we survive and reach the bottom, we lose all of our items, levels, and stat boosts. Because of this, we as players must be highly calculating in our approach to combat, exploration, and resource management. Being too brazen, too cowardly, too stingy, or too wasteful will spell death. And I've personally found that the winning strategy lies not in finding a balanced medium, but instead in knowing which of these four extremes to adopt at any given time. The decisions you'll have to take largely depend on what you're carrying on your 20 item max inventory, and you'll have to consider well what things you hold on to or leave behind. To add difficulty to this consideration, often you'll find unidentified items, which you'll need to use to be able to discern their effects. This can often be risky as you're essentially taking a gamble on what is going to happen. For example, I once made one of my enemies invincible by accident. The only way around this risk is to use an identification item instead. Now, to make things really clear, here are all the types of items we can find in game. Meat and hearts are basic restorative items. Eating these will refill your health or your vitality, with the amount regained dependent on their quality. If you eat one of these and it turns out to be rotten, you'll heal up but it'll make your tummy hurt. Bones are consumables that have special effects depending on their type. They make up the dungeon's most common and useful selection of tools, so you'll want to always keep a good bone at hand, as they can teleport you to safety, identify items, kill enemies and more. Torturers work the same way as bones, except that they affect entire rooms at once. Injectable fluids raise your stats and help you recover from status effects. Parasites and brands add unique properties to your weapons and character, and symbols make silly things happen when you step on them. For equipment we have swords to attack, coats to bolster our defenses, artificial wings that provide us with special buffs and immunities, and the Angelic Rifle, which is a one-shot, one-kill weapon that has only 5 bullets available per run. All of these can be used and equipped, but most importantly, thrown. It took me a few hours to figure it out, but flinging shit like a monkey is not only key to combat, but also essential to complete the story. The thing is, our character is mute for plot reasons, meaning we're unable to speak directly to NPCs. Also, the game never gives you a prompt to use stuff, so an important part of getting to understand the game is shoving stuff into people's faces and seeing what happens. Hell, our only method of long-term character progression is throwing our items into these mysterious orbs called sense spheres, so our stuff gets transported back to the entrance of the tower, making them available at the beginning of our next run. This mechanic gives us another layer of risk to consider. You'll have to weigh if you're ruining your current run for the sake of the next, or on the contrary, if you're gonna lose it all by trying to push through with your best stuff in tow. These spheres are relatively rare and only allow you to throw in a single item per orb, forcing you to think well about your goals for your current and future runs. Because again, if we die, or even if we succeed, we're taken back to the beginning to start over from scratch. The only caveat is that things slowly change as we uncover the secrets of the tower. Every time we restart, the character's dialogue changes, and by achieving certain milestones, the dungeon grows deeper and more complex, allowing us to explore more, slowly piece together a narrative, and eventually discover the game's true ending. Because of this, Baroque is a title that was truly ahead of its time in the delivery of its gameplay loop and story. As cumbersome and as cryptic as it might seem at first glance, given enough time, it will start to seduce you. What at first I believed to be nothing more than a quirky experimental roguelike has taken me on a sort of archaeological journey, where I've been compelled to unearth and puzzle together pieces of information scattered throughout many different sources, which revealed Baroque to be a surprisingly expansive and multifaceted work. Looking at the whole picture, I can only say that Baroque in all its forms and iterations is a true work of art. Somehow a game commentating about accepting with open arms the inevitable distortion of things, through its own history, came to embody that very same concept. In order to not confuse you going forward, I'll explain the game's narrative in detail. And while I did read the surrounding works in order to fully understand them, I'm basing this summary on the chronology available on the fan-made NeoCities website, because my brain has a storage capacity of a half-eaten walnut. So, in the late 2020s, Japanese scientists discovered invisible organic structures that surrounded the planet like a nervous system. They traced the origin of these tissues to somewhere deep below the ground, where they found God laying dormant. Working together with the government, a structure was built around it, and a team was dispatched to study this being and its behavior. The tissues were dubbed sense spheres, as their purpose was to sense the world around them and inform God of any anomalies present. The anomalies are transformed into data via purification, corrected, and returned to their proper place. But one man, who would later become the Archangel, experimented with creating artificial sense spheres in an attempt to communicate with God. His attempt at interfacing with the Creator, however, drove him mad. He became obsessed with the idea of correcting the world, as he saw it as flawed and full of suffering, and thus hatched a plan to replace the Creator. He recorded the voice of God and transcribed it into a melody. Whoever listened to this melody would become suggestible and obsessed with their personal delusions. He used this to take over the government and established himself as the head of a cult called the Order of Malkuth, the members of this cult believing themselves as angels working to protect God. The Archangel started feeding his own version of reality to the sense spheres via tarot cards, but this only made God's immune response act up and increase the number of sensory organs present in the world. The people who came in contact with these succumbed to a sort of unique madness, which was named Baroque syndrome after a psychiatrist used the word to describe the grandiose illusions that characterized those who were afflicted. In order to circumvent God's corrective response, the Archangel devised a method to anesthetize a being, to remove the pain signals that inform the organism of any abnormalities. He also cultivated these pain hormones into a concentrated form, creating a small creature made out of pure pain and stored it inside special capsules. If this being makes contact with something, anything really, the pain felt by God is so great that the object in question is immediately deleted from existence. The Archangel's plan then became to shoot this substance into the main body, forcing God to erase itself. Unable to feel pain, the world was unable to correct itself and started to severely deform. This is when people started to transform into grotesques, which in reality are physical representations of the Archangel's tarot. Before his plan was fully enacted, a group of people within the laboratory woke up from their trance and set out to stop the Archangel. In order to diagnose and heal the creator, this group decided to fuse one member with God so as to be able to communicate with them in human terms. The one who was chosen to do this was our protagonist. The reason for this was that he was originally one half of a conjoined twin, the other sibling being sacrificed for the sake of the other's survival. The group theorized that this fact could provide the subject's psyche with some resistance against the strain of having two minds fused. The procedure went underway, but then was forcibly interrupted by the Archangel. The pain response of God was so great that the world burned to cinders. In the commotion, the Archangel was impaled into a sense sphere. However, he cleverly used it to project himself and ordered his lackeys to imprison the rogue group and capture the protagonist. Some time passed, and he learned of the protagonist's newly acquired ability to purify, which resulted as an after effect of the fusion experiment. Seeing the opportunity in this, he decided to wipe his memories, clone him, and manipulate him to obtain God's soul for himself. This is the starting point of the game, and I completed it without knowing all of this. So as I start to tell you about my playthrough, try to think about how confused I was at any given moment. My journey with Baroque began with the PlayStation 1 port of the game, which is considered by many to be the inferior version. The game starts with a badass credit sequence, in which the world is scorched and deformed by the great heat wave as industrial music plays, just before having our protagonist shoot a grotesque, step on a bloodied angel feather, and peer into the distance, towards the nerve tower. Then we get to this killer of a title screen. I am a fan of the deep red of the text against the muted colors of the background and the highly contrasted shadows of the tower, which showcases its silhouette. If we wait long enough in here, we're greeted by a highly stylized but nearly incomprehensible cinematic explaining the definition of the word Baroque and what it means in the setting of the game. To make it short, the word originally meant a distorted or irregular pearl, and then came to designate the art movement we all recognize. In terms of the game, however, the word means the delusions we hold within ourselves that keep us away from despair, which at the same time are distortions of the soul being visually represented as a pearl. So in a convoluted way, we're being told that the game's name refers to the original meaning of the word, and not Vivaldi. Cool. So we start the game, name our save, and guess what? Here's another cryptic cutscene. This time we're shown some sort of medical pod in an industrial bay, as we overhear a bunch of pharmacological terminology. Like everything else in this game, it is not readily apparent or understandable on a first impression, but as it turns out, our main character is thrust into a virtual simulation of the world to test their ability to traverse the tower. We awaken in the virtual world, in a dilapidated town inhabited by mutants. If we get close to them, they say things, and if we punch them, they say other things. Again, everything seems to be completely unintelligible, but over time we'll be able to learn what each of these characters mean. You can head directly to the nerve tower, but luckily I stumbled myself into the tutorial dungeon, where the mechanics of the game were explained to me. The tower of the simulated world consists of a simple 5-floor dungeon, which serves as a gentle introduction to the game's gameplay cycle. It doesn't matter if we fail or succeed during this run, the game will progress normally into the real world, albeit with a different cutscene depending on the outcome. Being a newbie to the game, I died on the last floor. The cutscene I got was of the main character spasming and having to be stabilized via drug administration. An observer comments that my failure to complete the task means that my character, one of many copies of the same person, is worthless, but another observer replies that in the real world anything can happen, so we might be of use after all. After that, we're set free. We awaken in the real world, in the same town as before, and begin the game's real gameplay loop. The first thing we need to do to progress is get to the bottom of the tower and meet with God on floor 16. In the attempts it took me to get to the bottom, I began to get familiar with the game and discover some fun things. For example, if you infest a parasite with another parasite, you'll get a parasite that has the abilities of both combined, allowing you to create some very useful synergies. Or that if you eat food when you're at max health or vitality, you'll increase your maximum values. I once used a torturer to summon all of the dungeon's monsters into my current room, followed by another that transformed them into rotten hearts. I ate all of them and then healed myself from the horrible stomach cramps that lowered my stats into oblivion. So experimentation is good, if you're smart about it. The first time I arrived at the bottom of the tower, I didn't have the option to shoot God, because I threw my rifle into an orb in the outskirts of town, which did nothing. Thankfully, fusing with God is the first step in progressing the game, so my own ignorance saved me some effort. As I climbed the tower again, I found a secret wall that I only noticed because I was able to see through the textures. Here I met Eliza, who asked me to bring her pure water. So there's these two girls you meet in the dungeon, Alice and Eliza, which are fragments of God's consciousness trying to repair itself. Eliza wants pure water, which means uncorrupted data, so as to be able to have a reference from which to correct anomalies. Alice is trying to restore God's sensation of pain. We are unable to progress with these quests until one of the town's inhabitants buries himself in the ground. It doesn't make much sense, I know. He asks us to give him a heart, which we need to take from the tower and throw it to him. The dude is very fresh for a sentient palm tree, as he mocked me for missing my throw. Then we have to pass a bit of time cycling through the tower until he blooms and then rots and dies. He will leave his soul behind, which we need to take and then show to the guard on the town's entrance. This will make the dude bury himself into the ground too. His reason? It seemed comfortable. After he also rots away, we are able to enter the laboratory, where we find multiple clones of ourselves. We purify them and are able to get our soul back. The clones call it our water. After escaping the laboratory, we meet with Eliza again. We give her our soul, which she'll use to create new sense spheres with correct data as reference. If we reunite with God again, they're more coherent this time, but are unable to keep themselves sane given the absence of pain. They seem to not care about restoring the world and just want to reunite with us. So we gotta climb the tower some more. On one of the upper levels, we meet with a close associate of the Archangel, who reveals to us the truth behind the angelic rifle, that the bullets consist of concentrated living pain. She feels intense remorse for this, as she's the one who created them. Meeting with Eliza again, she forms a new sense sphere, and we get a flashback to us playing chess with our conjoined twin, then being separated from him and performing the fusion with God. By this point the tower has expanded, and we need to reach into deeper levels to complete the game. Thing is, the game starts getting quite a bit harder from here on out, so I took special care to take with me a very powerful weapon in every run, make sure to not lose it and upgrade it whenever I could. In any case, now we have to find and liberate God's pain, which resides on floor 20. You can only access the area if you have not used the angelic rifle during your current run, which I didn't. After getting the data for God's pain, we give it to Alice and she understandably feels horrible. Carrying all of her teenage girl angst within her, she goes back to fuse with God. The tower expands again, and now we only need one last venture to the 31st floor. Shit gets really bonkers on this level, so my advice is to just rush to the top. Avoid fighting, only get what you need, use things sparingly, and don't take any detours for any reason. There are enemies that fire cannonballs at you, so try to move in a zigzag pattern. And don't look back. If you look back, you slow down, and if you slow down, you die. Only on the 31st floor can we rest, as the place is completely empty save for the impaled Archangel and us. We talk with the angel and reunite with God one last time. Having both pure data and a sensation of pain restored, we don't succumb to madness. However, it turns out that the world cannot be fixed, as the idea of order was merely a delusion fabricated by God. The only choice we have is to move forward and accept distortion and corruption as a part of life. Credits play, a little angel flashes his butt, and the game ends. At that moment, just having finished the game, I couldn't help but recognize that I had truly understood nothing about what the game was trying to tell. It is then that I decided to investigate what people online had to say about it, and came across all of the Other Baroques. And by that I mean the manga adaptation, the Sega Saturn original, the PS2 and Wii remake, the typing and mobile games, the novella prequel, the visual novel, the official art book, the interviews, and of course, the idol group. Experiencing most of them is how I came to understand Baroque, but what stood out to me is that every product relating to Baroque is a deformation of the idea of the game, which is ironic considering that the main message of the game seems to be the acceptance of imperfections. Turns out that the version I played has worse graphics, stretched out sprites, is missing animations and music, and has extra floors added as padding. The Wii and PS2 port is worse, with a generic anime art style, a cool but unfitting soundtrack, an even more padded out dungeon, a third-person perspective that doesn't mesh too well with the gameplay, and floaty controls. The original style, with its high contrast, heavily saturated colors, and a fusion of organic and mechanical elements, while not completely lost, has definitely become muddied. The original's music, which is mostly composed of heavy industrial sounds, has been replaced with wailing guitars and an electronic soundscape, and it seems that the story has been slightly changed to fit better with the manga adaptation and visual novel, where the Archangel wants to avenge his favorite sister instead of trying to rectify the world according to his ideals. While not all of this is bad, as it certainly has its high notes, it does leave me with the impression that it sort of misses the point. What is kind of a bad look though is the milking of the IP via casual games. The PC games like Baroque Shooter and Baroque Typing have a certain Y2K charm to them, but as for Baroque M, I don't see how anyone would want to play this over something like Crossy Road. In the end, due to corporate interests, ghostwriting, the incorporation of fanfiction into canon, and Father Time, the original soul and vision seems to have become obscured. But to me, this is an inevitability for any work of art that has any sort of cultural impact. It might seem that visual art has been reduced to Pinterest tags, books are now only worth their capacity to be movie adaptations, games have become defined by their porn-addicted fandoms, and music at large has become TikTok soundbites or vaporwave samples. But let's be real, that's just viewing things on a negative lens. In fact, if you think about it, having this happen probably is the highest honor one can get as an artist. To have your work be influential enough that it takes a life of its own, that it gets to live, change, grow old and die, leave its bones behind, just like us. And that's the end of the video. To finish this, I'll head to the arcade and play Pump It Up while you listen to Baroque Mode's music.